Well, welcome back. Today we're into a little different work. I've been making a set of moldings for the edge of a table. You know, I don't like throwing anything out. If anything can be salvaged and reused, I like that. I've been accused of being cheap. I say I'm frugal. So, the table that in question is an oak veneered table made of some kind of wood material, some kind of pressed board or particle board of some sort. But a really handy table. The only problem is, on the edges of the table, the factory installed veneer is all peeling off. So it's got to go. So I thought, well, we'll make a few little oak moldings that will match the table and put the table back to use. It was made to use and we're going to keep using it. Now I've got most of the moldings made here. 2 for the long side, made 1 for one of the ends, and we still have 1 to go. Now of course, we get to these little strips of wood the same way we do with any piece of wood. We start with a board, we saw it and plane it. We go through the routine of gauging it to a width, gauging it to a thickness, and then when we plane down to that, everything will be exactly the same for all of our pieces of wood. After that, all that's required is putting a little molding on these corners. These corners are sharp. I should warn you about this actually. If you're using hardwood of almost any type and you plane the face of a board with a hand plane and plane the edge with a hand plane, that corner can be as sharp as a knife. You can cut yourself badly on that. You just don't want dangerous tables. Tables are for gathering around and enjoying good food and having a glass of wine. Now you don't want to hurt yourself. But now I just have one step I have to do on this little piece here, because it's a rather nice looking little piece of oak, but the grain is in and out and up and down, and even with a sharp hand plane there can be little bits of roughness where the grain tears out. And I've got just a little spot here and I just want to touch it up. But I'm not going to use a regular plane to do that. I'm going to use a scraper plane. This is just a little homemade plane. A block of wood and a wedge and a cutting iron that's actually beyond the vertical. Just a thin little piece of metal. I cut it from an old saw blade, and the edge is sharpened and just kind of rolled over a bit, barely protrudes through the wooden sole. So I'm just going to clean up a little bit here and then we're going to make a molding. Now, you see a scraper plane takes out fine little shavings. And it cleans up and it leaves a very clean surface behind it. I'd say we're ready to make the moldings on the edge of this little strip of wood that we need to make. To do that, I've got to be able to hold this piece of wood. Can't let it flop around on the bench. With a bench plane or a scraper, all the thrust goes directly ahead and just against the bench stop. No problem. But to mold the edge, I've got to push the tool against the edge, and if I do that without anything to hold it, everything goes sideways. Now my bench is, like everything else in my shop, pretty basic, you know. No fancy vices, none of that. So, to compensate, I make bits and pieces of fixtures to hold wood in place when I need to. This is just a piece of pine, soft white pine, with a strip that's screwed down to the face of it. I can unscrew it and move it if I have a wider piece or a narrower piece. Just 2 little screws in the end. And all I need to do is take my little strip of wood, push it against that stop, and that holds it. And I can mold that edge. I want to show you the kind of molding we want to put on this. I've already molded these. All the molding is, it's very simple, it's just a little quarter circle of wood. Dropped down below the face and dropped in from the edge. Very, very simple molding. But it effectively breaks that edge so you don't have a sharp, dangerous edge. Doesn't chip off easily. And it adds a little bit of style to a very simple utilitarian table. Now to make that kind of molding, I'm going to use an old molding plane. They're called planes, but they're not really, but they work like a plane. So they're called planes. If you think about it, a plane makes a plane surface. And you can remember your geometry class, a plane surface is dead flat. Well, this makes anything but a flat surface. If you look at this molding plane, you see the sole of the plane is cut out. It's got a little hollow in the center, little edges on it. The cutter protrudes through the bottom, and actually the bottom of the plane is the exact reverse of the molding we want. So let's make a molding. Start at the back end of the board. Put the plane, I'll show you one other thing. If you can see on the end of the plane, there's a little line that runs sort of diagonally, in line with this edge of the plane. This is called the fence. It's called the fence because it runs along the edge of the board. The other flat is called the depth stop, because we're going to plane down until this edge hits the top of our little strip of wood. When it hits the top, it stops cutting and the molding is finished. So I have to just take the plane and put it on the end of the board. I have to sight down along this line. That'll give me an indication of when my plane is tipped the right amount. Some planes are meant to use like this on an angle. It's called a sprung plane. Other planes are made to use straight up and down. You have to look at the front of the plane to see the marks and know a little about them. So first we start, put the plane on the end, sight down, walk it through. And it takes a little molding off, a little shaving off. Just starts that first part of the molding. There it is. When it comes down to the point where it stops cutting, it's done. Now we just do the other side, and the molding is finished. After that, we have the fun of cutting it, gluing it in place, and all that. But that's basically how you do it. Never underestimate what you can do with a few good old tools.